Okay, so now what do you need to know about federalism? We talked about the Federalist Papers, but federalism. So first, federalism means that power is divided between the national government and the state's government. Federalism is when you divide power at different levels. In the United States, that's between the national and state governments. Dual federalism is what was originally in the Constitution. So we go back 1788 all the way till 1937. There are distinct differences between the national powers and state powers. Very clear differences. What is a national responsibility? What is a state responsibility? National government handled international policy, interstate commerce, things like that. Very distinct. States handled police powers, so had police forces and things like that. States were more powerful, according to the Constitution, but there was the Supremacy Clause that said states, when state and national laws contradicted, the national government won. Cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism starts in 1937. That's when dual federalism ends, when cooperative federalism starts in 1937. This is during the New Deal, the Great Depression. Franklin Roosevelt is the president associated with this. During the Great Depression, people were really desperate. The economy was really bad. All sorts of bad things were happening. So people, when things are desperate, will accept dramatic, huge changes. So for example, well, in cooperative federalism, there's a blurring of the distinction between national and state. Now, the national government is getting the states to cooperate on projects with the national government. The national government is taking a lot more power. One example of how dramatic this change was is the reinterpretation of the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause says that Congress can regulate interstate trade, trade that crosses state borders, or trade with other countries, but there was a state power to regulate trade within the state. Well, this changes with the New Deal and cooperative federalism. And an example would be Wickard v. Filburn, which was a Supreme Court case in 1942. During the Great Depression, in order to help out farmers, Congress started making limits on how much each farmer could grow of certain crops. And the idea was to limit the supply of those crops, which would raise the prices of the crops and help the farmers out. Well, there was a particular farmer who was growing extra crops on his farm and using that extra in order to feed his own animals. And the government came in and said, you're growing too much of this food. And he said, well, I'm not selling this food, I'm not selling the extra, I'm not trading, I'm just feeding it to my own animals. So this food wasn't even leaving his farm in any way. And the government said, nope, you still can't do that. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the farmer's argument was Congress can only regulate trade that crosses state borders. This food wasn't even leaving his farm. Well, the Supreme Court said, well, no, actually, Congress can regulate this because by growing your own food, you're not buying food, and therefore you're affecting interstate commerce, because if you weren't allowed to grow your own food, you'd have to buy it. So this was a major change, the idea that Congress could actually regulate what you were doing on your own property and staying on your own property. So at this point, Congress can do almost anything. They can regulate almost anything if they can regulate what food you can grow on your own property to feed your own animals. So major change in cooperative federalism, dual federalism, that distinct difference between national and state powers is basically gone. How does the government control the states or get the states to cooperate? It is, of course, by using money. The national government offers money to states. Sometimes it's, if you will do this, we will give you this money. Sometimes the states get money from the federal government, and then the government comes in and says, if you don't do this new thing we want, we'll take back or stop giving you money. But either way, the national government is using money to control the states. This money comes in the form of grants and aid, grants to help the states in some way. There are a few different types that you need to know about. Block grants. Block grants, you think of like a big block. It's a lot of money given for a general type of funding, like infrastructure, like roads, highways, ports, airports, or it could be for education or something like that. But within that, the states have a lot of freedom to do exactly what they want within that large category. There are project grants. In this case, states apply for the money. They say, we want to build this new highway, or we want to build a new airport or whatever, and they ask the federal government to pay for it. And the federal government may or may not approve that grant. And there's formula grants where there's a math formula that says if you meet these requirements, you get this amount of money. So different types of grants out there. Later on, we get to something called regulated federalism. This is when the government starts using regulations. Congress makes rules, the president has the executive agencies like Environmental Protection Agency and stuff like that. They make regulations that control the states. Americans with Disabilities Act, OSHA, Occupational Safety, NCLBs, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top. These are all different regulations that control what states can do. So No Child Left Behind, for example, required states to have standardized testing in reading and math every year from 3rd grade through 10th grade. That's why you have to take those tests every year, FSAs and now FAST tests, because that's what the law says. These laws, these regulations can make mandates. Mandates might be paid for by the federal government. The government might come in and say, you have to do these things, here's the money to do it. Or they might just say, no, you have to do this or else. In the case of No Child Left Behind, for example, it was create all these standardized tests or you will lose money, we'll quit giving you money. So that's an unfunded mandate. The government created a rule but did not fund it. Later on, we get to new federalism. This is associated with Presidents Nixon and Reagan, two very conservative presidents who wanted more power back at the state level. So again, this is a conservatism. They wanted to cut federal taxes, reduce regulation, move power from the national government back to the states. But it's not nearly back to dual federalism. It doesn't look like we're ever getting back there. But definitely more power back to the states. Today, where are we? Well, different presidents will have different philosophies, and we kind of bounce back and forth between cooperative, regulated, and new federalism. There you go.